The school counselor didn't call me to report a problem. She called me on a Thursday afternoon in early September to tell me something she thought I should know, which in 32 years of working with children, she said she had learned was almost always the more important conversation. Mrs. Nora Stiles, 14 years at Carmel Elementary in Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of woman who keeps her office full of plants and speaks in the measured, unhurried voice of someone who has spent a career listening to children say things adults weren't ready to hear. Mr. Voss, she said, I want to be straightforward with you. Your grandson has been adjusting beautifully. His academics are strong. His friendships are healthy. I'm not calling about any of that. She paused. When we updated our emergency contact forms this year, the children filled them out in class. Your name is listed first. Your son Marcus is listed second. The third line, she paused again, was left blank. He wrote a dash. I asked him if there was someone else he'd like to add, and he looked at me very carefully and said, It's fine. I just wanted you to know. I said, How long ago did he fill that form out? 3 weeks, she said. I've been thinking about whether to call you. Why did you decide to? Because, she said, a 9-year-old who is very precise about who he does and doesn't include on a form like that, that's not an accident. That's information. I thanked her. I meant it. I hung up and stood at the kitchen window for a long moment with my thermos in my hand, the coffee inside it already cooling, and I thought about that dash. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get comfortable, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. My name is Arthur Voss. I am 66 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a house on Briar Creek Road that I have owned since 2003 and consider largely finished, which in a house means there are only 2 rooms left that need anything. I spent 32 years as a government contractor, the kind of work that required me to be exact, to understand systems from the inside out, to know that what a structure looks like on paper and what it actually is are 2 different things that must be reconciled before you can trust it. I retired 3 years ago. I drink my coffee from a thermos I fill every morning at 5:45 a.m. before anyone else in the neighborhood is awake, because that first hour is mine and has been mine for 30 years, and I see no reason to renegotiate that arrangement. I drive a 2013 Toyota Tundra, navy blue, 118,000 miles, which I have maintained with the attentiveness of a man who understands that well-maintained things last and neglected things fail quietly and without warning. I coach youth baseball on Saturday mornings with a man named Dennis Fry, who has been umpiring for 23 years and considers the infield fly rule to be one of civilization's finer achievements. My son is Marcus Voss, 36 years old. He is a structural project manager at a firm in uptown Charlotte, the kind of work that requires him to understand what holds things up, which I take a certain satisfaction in, though I've never said so. He is a good father. He has been a good father since the morning Tyler was born, and he called me at 4:17 a.m. from the hospital to tell me. His voice cracked in the way voices crack when something happens that you weren't fully prepared for no matter how much you prepared. He has been raising Tyler largely on his own since Tyler was 3, when his marriage ended in the specific quiet way of 2 people who had grown in different directions and were honest enough to say so. He does not complain about this. He manages it the way he manages everything, with a calendar and a plan, and the occasional phone call to his father when the calendar and the plan aren't quite enough. Tyler Voss is 9 years old. He is precise, observant, and has a sense of humor that arrives without announcement at unexpected moments, and then disappears before you can fully respond to it. He has called me Grandpa since he could talk. He carries a small spiral notebook in his backpack that he calls his idea book, which contains, as far as I've been permitted to see, drawings of baseball plays, a list of the best sandwiches he has ever eaten in order of preference, and several very detailed observations about the behavior of squirrels in our yard. He is the kind of child who notices things and writes them down, which is a quality I recognize because it is one I have always had myself. My wife is Diane Voss. We have been married 7 years. She was 50 when we married. I was 59, and we came to each other with full lives already built and the mutual understanding that those lives would be respected. She has 2 sons from her first marriage, Paul, 34, and Greg, 31, both of whom live within 40 minutes of our house. Paul has a daughter, for years old, named Sadie. Greg has twin boys, 2 years old, named Owen and Cole. Diane is thoroughly and visibly a grandmother to all 3 of them. Birthdays, holidays, spontaneous Sunday visits. She has a framed photograph on the mantel of herself with all 3 of her grandchildren that was taken last Easter, and is the kind of photograph that tells you immediately who matters in this room. Tyler is not in that photograph. I want to be careful here, because care is what this deserves. Diane has not been unkind to Tyler. She is pleasant to him. She asks him appropriate questions about school and baseball, and offers him food when he is here. She does not ignore him. She simply does not include him. There is a specific and meaningful difference between those 2 things, and I have understood the difference intellectually for some time while choosing, until now, not to fully look at it. The school counselor's call changed what I was willing to look at. 3 weeks before that call, on a Monday in late August, Tyler had come home from school with his backpack and the specific expression of a child who has had a full day and is done accounting for it. He dropped his bag by the door, got himself a glass of water, and came to the kitchen table where I was reading. Homework? I asked. He shrugged, the universal 9-year-old answer. He rooted through his backpack, pulled out a blue folder, and inside the folder was an emergency contact form. It was a standard school form. 3 columns: name, relationship, phone number. The first line was pre-filled by the school with my name and number from their records. Tyler picked up a pencil, his own, a mechanical one he keeps sharpened, because Tyler is finicky about his pencils, and he filled in the second line with Marcus's name and phone number from memory, which he had memorized the way children memorize things that matter to them, without being asked. He got to the third line. I watched him look at it. His pencil hovered. He was doing what he always did when thinking. Tip of the tongue at the corner of his mouth. The pencil still, eyes slightly unfocused. Then he drew a single dash in the name column. Not a scribble. A dash. Deliberate. He moved to the next section of the form, filled in his teacher's name, his classroom number, and signed the bottom line in the careful block letters of a child who has been told that signatures are important. Then he slid the form across the table to me. Would you check it, Grandpa? I looked at the form. At my name at the top. At Marcus in the middle. At the dash. Looks good, Bud, I said. He nodded, put the form back in the blue folder, zipped it into his backpack, and said, Do you want a snack? And I said yes, and he made us both peanut butter crackers with the serious efficiency of a child who considers snack preparation a responsibility. And we sat there and ate them and talked about the squirrel situation in the yard, which had apparently escalated. I thought about the dash all evening. I did not ask Tyler about it. There are questions you ask a 9-year-old and questions you don't, and the rule I have always used is this. If a child has said as much as he intends to say, asking more doesn't get you more truth. It just puts the truth under pressure, which changes it. Tyler had said exactly as much as he intended to say. A dash. That was the whole statement. After he went to bed, I sat on the back porch. The Charlotte evening in late August has a specific quality. Warm still, but with the first suggestion of something cooler underneath it, the way August always promises September before it arrives. I sat out there with my thermos and the last of the day's coffee, which by 9 p.m. had gone thoroughly cold, and I let the dash sit in my mind and looked at it from different angles the way I used to look at project specifications when something didn't add up. A 9-year-old has been coming to this house for 7 years. For 7 years, my wife has been in this house. For 7 years, there's been a third blank on every form like that one. And for 7 years, Tyler had apparently been arriving at that blank and making a calculation. That night, I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my thermos. Empty. I made a fresh pot I didn't need, poured a cup, and sat with it. The house was quiet. Diane was asleep. I pulled out a yellow legal pad, and I wrote at the top, "What do I actually know?" Then I wrote down everything. Not what I suspected. Not what I felt. What I knew. What I knew was a list that took half a page and grew heavier with each line. When I finished writing, I sat with it for a long time. Then I put the legal pad in the second drawer, where I keep things I'm not done thinking about. And I went to bed. The school counselor called 3 weeks later. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. hit the like button while you're at it and drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to tell you about the porch because it matters. After Mrs. Stiles' call, I went out to the back porch. 4:22 in the afternoon. I sat down in a chair I keep out there. The wooden one with the armrests I sanded down myself 3 summers ago because the finish had gone rough, and I put my thermos on a rail, and I looked at the yard. The backyard on Briar Creek Road is not remarkable. A large oak in the far left corner that has been there significantly longer than I have. A lawn that I keep reasonable. A garden bed along the right fence that I put in 6 years ago and maintain with the attentiveness of a man who finds digging things therapeutic. Tyler has helped me in that garden. Every spring, he's been old enough to hold a trowel. Last April, he planted 3 tomato seedlings himself, named them individually, and asked for weekly progress reports. I sat on that porch, and I thought about Tyler planting those tomatoes, about his idea book, about the peanut butter crackers, about the photograph on the mantel with Sadie and Owen and Cole, and the specific absence in it that I had looked at every day for over a year and chosen to understand as a composition choice and not a statement, about a dash on a blue form. Something settled over me in that chair. Not anger, not grief, just a cold, specific weight of finally understanding what you've been looking at without quite seeing it. The difference between a pattern and a coincidence. The difference between someone being busy and someone being selective. The difference between your grandson being a visiting child and your grandson being a child who belongs in your house, completely, with his name on the forms. He had not put Diane's name on the form because he did not believe she would come. That was the whole truth of it. 9 years old, and he had already done the math. I sat on that porch for 22 minutes. I know because I looked at my watch when I sat down, and again when I stood up. Then I went inside, opened the second drawer, took out the legal pad, and added 4 words to the bottom of the list. Then I called my son. Marcus answered on the second ring. Already sounded like a man who had been carrying something he was ready to set down. Dad, hey, is Tyler okay? Tyler's fine, I said. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, even if you think the honest answer is going to upset me. Okay. His voice was careful. Does Tyler talk to you about Diane? A silence. Not long, but real. He said things, Marcus said. Quietly, not complaints. Just observations. What kind of observations? He told me once that Grandma Diane smells nice, but doesn't really hug him. He was 6. I filed it away. He told me last Christmas that Sadie got to help make the pie, and he didn't. He didn't make a big deal about it. His school counselor called me today. I said, he left Diane's name off his emergency contact form. Put a dash. Silence. Then, quietly, I know about the form. You know, his teacher mentioned it to me at drop-off last week. She wanted to make sure we weren't missing a contact. I told her we weren't. Why didn't you tell me? Because Marcus said, and I could hear him choosing his word with the care of a man who has thought about this many times. I didn't know what you could do with it, and I didn't want to be the reason you looked at your marriage differently. I thought about that for a moment. The specific weight of the son protecting his father from information the father deserved. Marcus, I said, I'm looking at it now. He exhaled. Yeah, I know, Dad. Tell me everything you've noticed. Everything. In order. He told me. I listened without interrupting. The way my own father taught me to listen, which is to say completely, without preparing what you're going to say next. It took 11 minutes. When he finished, I had 4 more lines on the legal pad. I thanked him. I told him Tyler was the finest 9-year-old I knew, which was not a low bar given that I coached 12 of them on Saturday mornings, and that I was going to take care of this, and that I would call him again when there was something to call about. Okay, Dad, he said. And then, after a pause, I'm glad you called. So, am I said. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table with the yellow legal pad and the cold coffee and the specific quiet of house on a Thursday afternoon when everything in it is familiar and nothing in it is quite the same as it was 3 hours ago. Diane came home at 6:15. I made dinner. We ate. We talked. She told me about a difficult client meeting, and I told her about the garden, which had been doing well. Ordinary things. I did not say anything about the form. Not yet. There's a time for everything. and the time for this particular conversation required me to first understand exactly what I was carrying into it. That night, at 11 p.m., I got Tyler's emergency contact form from the blue folder in his backpack, which he had left in the hall. I looked at it for a long time. My name, Marcus's name, the dash. I put it in the second drawer, on top of the legal pad. Then I turned off the light and went to sit on the back porch one more time, in the dark, in the Charlotte night, with the oak tree in the garden and the specific September air that had finally made good on its promise to be cooler. And I stayed there long enough to be sure of what I was going to do next. Friday, September 12th, 9 a.m. Helen Marsh has been my attorney for 9 years. She practices family and estate law out in an office on South Tryon Street. Third floor, the kind of office that has been organized so thoroughly it communicates something about the person inside it before she says a word. Helen is 61 years old, small, precise, with the quality of stillness that very effective people often have. The sense that she is in no hurry because she has already thought further ahead than you have. She listened to me for 12 minutes without writing anything down. When I finished, she set her pen on the desk. Arthur. She used my first name the way she always did at the start of a difficult assessment. What do you need from me today? I need to understand where I stand, I said. And I need to make certain adjustments before I have any conversations with Diane. She picked up the pen. You said certain adjustments. Be specific. Beneficiary designations. The estate documents. The property trust one set up in 2019. I want to understand what's in her name and whether those designations still reflect my intentions. She nodded. Do you have documents with you? I put a manila folder on her desk. Inside, the property trust. Both individual retirement account summaries. My personal will, last updated 2 years ago. The deed to the house on Briar Creek Road. A one-page summary I had written myself the previous night at the kitchen table, organized by asset and current beneficiary. Because 32 years of contract work had made me constitutionally unable to walk into a professional meeting without a summary document. She read the summary first, then the will, then the trust. She set them down. Here's your picture, she said, and she walked me through it with the brisk clarity of someone who has done this many times and considers precision a form of respect for the client's time. The house, held in my name alone, predating the marriage, never transferred. Clean, the property trust. Individual, established before the marriage, no marital assets commingled, fully protected. The 2 retirement accounts, one had Diane as primary beneficiary, named in 2019, the other named Marcus. The will, Diane appeared as co-primary heir alongside Marcus on the personal estate, split 60-40. She set the will down. The beneficiary on the retirement account is yours to change independent of any other action. No documentation required beyond the form itself. I'd recommend doing that today, regardless of what you decide about the marriage. I already had the form in the folder. She noticed. The corner of her mouth moved. Call your plan administrator from the parking lot, she said. They'll walk you through it. What about the will? She looked at me steadily. That I can revise this week. It takes 1 meeting and a notary. The question is what you wanted to say. I told her. She wrote it down without reaction, which is what you want from an attorney. What are you planning to do about the marriage itself? She asked. I'm going to have a conversation, I said. A thorough one. After that, I'll know. She nodded. And if the conversation goes the way you expect it to, then I'll be back, I said, and we'll do the rest. She extended her hand across the desk. Then let's get your retirement account done first and work from there. I called the plan administrator from Helen's parking lot. 31 minutes on hold. 7 minutes of paperwork over the phone, and 1 transfer of primary beneficiary from Diane to Marcus, effective immediately. The woman on the phone read back the change in the flat procedural voice of someone who does this 40 times a day. I thanked her. She said, have a nice day. I sat in my truck for a moment and thought that I probably would. I spent the following days doing what I had always done when a project required understanding before action. I gathered information, not to build a case, to build a picture. There is a difference. A case is adversarial. A picture is just the truth, assembled carefully. I pulled 7 years of memory with the specific attention of a man who had spent 3 decades reading contracts, holiday dinners, who planned them, who was centered in them, who was treated as optional, birthday photographs, whose children appeared, whose were sometimes absent. School events Marcus had mentioned, the one where Diane had been invited and had another commitment, the one where she had come but spent most of the evening talking to a friend of hers who happened to be there, the garden, the tomatoes, the idea book, the dash. I wrote it all down, not to show anyone, just because I have never made a permanent decision without first making it legible on paper, where I can look at it clearly without the interference of hope or reluctance. On the 5th day, I called Marcus again, asked him one specific question. In 7 years, had Diane ever attended one of Tyler's baseball games? He was quiet for a moment. Once, he said. In year 2, she left at the 5th inning. I thanked him, added a line to the legal pad. On the 6th day, Tuesday, September 16th, Tyler came over after school. He had a project due Friday, a report on a state of his choosing, and he had chosen North Carolina with the loyalty of a child who has decided that home is the correct answer to most questions. We worked on it at the kitchen table for an hour and a half, Tyler writing in his careful block letters while I read him facts about the Wright brothers and the Blue Ridge Parkway and the specific and excellent question of why North Carolina has 2 different climate zones, which Tyler found genuinely interesting and spent 6 minutes asking follow-up questions about. When we finished, he put his materials in his backpack, got himself a glass of water, and sat back down. "Grandpa," he said. "Yeah." He looked at the table, at his glass, then up at me. "Is everything okay with you and Diane?" I looked at him. 9 years old, tongue at the corner of his mouth, idea book in his backpack, asking the question he'd been carrying with the careful restraint of a child who's been thinking about whether to say something for a while. "Everything is fine, but," I said, "I'm working on some things." He nodded slowly. "Okay, you don't need to worry about any of it." He looked at me for a moment. Then, in the specific voice he uses for things he's decided to say regardless of how they land, "I just want you to be happy, Grandpa." The kitchen was completely still. "I know," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "I know you do." He picked up his glass, finished his water, put the glass in the sink, rinsed it, set it in the drying rack the way I had shown him when he was 6, and he had decided this was the correct procedure and had followed it ever since. "I'll see you Saturday," he said. "Baseball." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. He picked up his backpack and went out the front door. I watched him go down the driveway and turn toward Marcus's car at the curb, and I felt something happen in my chest that I will not try to describe because the right words for it don't quite exist. What I can say is this. There are people who show you who they are, and there are people who show you who you are. Tyler Voss, 9 years old, with his idea book and his pencils and his dash, had done both. I sat at the kitchen table until I heard Diane's car in the driveway. She came in at 6:08 p.m., set her bag down, looked at the table, looked at me. She registered something in my face, the way she always could, because in 7 years of marriage she had learned to read me at least partially, though not, as it turned out, completely. "Dinner's on the stove," I said. "Sit down for a minute first." She sat. I put 3 things on the table. The emergency contact form, the original, still in the blue folder, Tyler's dash exactly as he had made it. Helen's asset summary, 1 page, which I had printed that morning at her office with her permission, and the legal pad, turn to the page I had started writing on 3 weeks ago, filled now on both sides. I did not say anything dramatic. I did not need to. I told her about the form, about the dash, about what the school counselor had said, about the conversation with Marcus, and what Marcus had been carrying for 7 years, and why he hadn't said it, which was out of love for me and not out of any failure of his own. I told her about the photograph on the mantel, and every version of that photograph I could remember from every year we had been married, about the baseball games and the holiday dinners in the garden and the tomatoes Tyler had named and asked for progress reports on. I told her all of it in the same voice I would use to walk a client through project assessment, measured, specific, without raising it once. She sat very still across from me. Her hands were flat on the table, The way hands are when someone is using stillness as a substitute for composure. I thought he understood. She said, that my family is different. That Paul and Greg's children are. She stopped. Are what? I said. She looked at the table. More present in my day-to-day life. Tyler's in this house, I said, every other week. He has been in this house since he was 2 years old. He plants tomatoes in our yard. He knows where we keep the mixing bowls. He asks about your day when he's here, because he has good manners and because he is trying. And he drew a dash on his emergency contact form where your name should be, because at 9 years old, he has already absorbed the information that you will not come. Her jaw tightened once, then released. I didn't intend for him to feel that way. I know you didn't, I said. I believe that. But intent and impact are two different load-bearing elements, and they are both real. A bridge that fails doesn't fail because of bad intentions. It fails because of what was actually carrying the weight. She looked at the legal pad, at the asset summary, at the form. Arthur, she said quietly, what does this mean? I looked at her for a long moment. Diane is not a villain. I want to be precise about that, the same way I have tried to be precise about everything in this story. She is a woman who had a family, built it with care, loves it thoroughly, and did not fully reckon with what it meant to add a second family through marriage, a family that included a grandson who was not her biological grandchild and whose claims on her heart she had treated as optional. That is a human failure. It is not a monstrous one, but it is also not one I can ask Tyler to absorb for the next 9 years while she decides whether to correct it. It means, I said, that I need you to be honest with me. Right now, tonight. Not about what you're willing to do going forward. About what you've been telling yourself for 7 years about that child, and why he doesn't appear in your life the same way Sadie and Owen and Cole do. The kitchen was quiet for a long time. She told me, I will not put all of it here because some of it was true, and some of it was painful, and none of it was hers alone to share. What I will tell you is that she was honest, more honest than I expected. Because honesty of that particular kind, the kind that requires you to say out loud the thing you've been carefully not examining, takes more from a person than most conversations do. When she finished, I looked at the legal pad, then at her. Thank you, I said. She looked at the asset summary. Her name was still on the will at that point. She didn't know about the retirement account. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said, I call Helen in the morning, and we figure out what this looks like going forward. Whether that's together or apart, that's a conversation that's going to take more than one evening. But I need you to understand something first. She looked at me. Tyler Voss, I said, is my grandson. He is in this family the same way I am in this family. Not more, not less, not differently. If we stay in this marriage, that is a fact of this marriage, not a variable in it. And if that's a fact you can't hold as true, then we need to know that now cleanly before any more time passes. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, I understand. I do not know yet whether she meant it the way I needed her to mean it. I do not know whether the understanding she expressed that evening in my kitchen at the table where Tyler had filled out his form will become the kind of understanding that shows up in a photograph, or at a baseball game, or in the family section of an emergency contact form the next time one comes home in a blue folder. What I know is this. I called Helen the following morning. We began the process of revising the will. Helen asked me what I wanted to reflect, and I told her. The people who are present, fully and without condition, in my life. She wrote it down. I drove Tyler to his baseball game that Saturday. October 4th, 8:30 a.m. Carmel Recreation Center. Field 3. The one with the tall oaks along the first baseline that drop acorns on the outfield in October, and that Tyler has named individually, which he has also done for 2 of the squirrels in our backyard. So this is consistent character. He played third base. He got 2 hits and made a throw from deep in a hole that Dennis Fry called the best he'd seen from a 9-year-old this season, which Dennis does not say lightly. After the game, Tyler came to the truck, cleats muddy, a grass stain on his knee, grinning the grin of a child who has done a good thing with his body and knows it. We drove to the place on South Boulevard he liked for a post-game lunch, the one that made the specific grilled cheese he considered the benchmark for all grilled cheeses, And we sat across from each other in a corner booth, and he told me about the throw in full technical detail for approximately 12 minutes, using the salt and pepper shakers to demonstrate positioning. I listened to every word. A man who shows up for the people who need him, not for credit, not for an audience, not when it's convenient. He is not doing something exceptional. He is doing something fundamental. And the people who cannot see the difference between presence and obligation, who have looked at a child's open loyalty and returned it with absence, they have not made a mistake. They have made a choice. And choices, unlike mistakes, do not simply correct themselves. A 9-year-old's pencil, a dash on a blue form, and a booth on South Boulevard with a grilled cheese and a salt shaker standing in for a shortstop. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dad's Raw Revenge. I will see you on the next one.